Okay. Good evening, everybody. We are now live on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in to the virtual open house for the proposed official plan amendment for lands municipally known as 226 Lockhart Drive. My name is Madeline Furco, and I'm a planner with the City of St. Catharines Planning and Building Services Department and the planner assigned to this file. Also joining me tonight from the city is Margaret Josipovic, manager of planning. Tonight, we are also joined by the planning consultant, Stephen Bedford, and ACK architects, John Reddycop and Michael Allen. This open house is currently being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel, where it will remain available for future viewing. Should any of you have any questions or comments following this open house, you can submit them to myself. My contact information is posted at the bottom of the slide, and it will be posted again at the end of this presentation. So quickly to just go over the order of tonight's events, I will first be making a presentation about the planning process, the city's policies, and understanding them in relation to the application in question. We will then hear from the applicants. We'll have a couple comments, and then we will wrap up hearing from registered speakers. If you'd like to review any of the submitted application items, you can view them at stcatharines.ca/development under the folder titled 226 Lockhart Drive. I will kindly ask for the duration of both presentations and when others are speaking. All participants will keep their cameras off and microphones on mute and save questions and comments for when they are called upon. To ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak, I will be calling upon participants in the order in which I received their registration form. For those watching on YouTube, if you have any questions, feel free to email them in and I will do my best to get back to you within a day or so. And with that, we will jump right in. So the City of St. Catharines is forecasted to grow to a population of 171,890 people by 2051, which is 35,000 more people from the population of 136,803 reported by the 2021 census. To accommodate this, Council is committed to the Government of Ontario to build 11,000 new units in St. Catharines by 2032. It is anticipated that 52% of this growth will be accommodated within the existing built boundary of the city, including through infill development. To accommodate growth, policies and plans are developed by the province, region, and city to ensure that growth happens in a way that creates sustainable, equitable, and complete communities. When reviewing applications for a proposed development, staff will form recommendations through considering these planning policies as well as receiving public input. So the city received the application for official plan amendment for 226 Lockhart Drive on January 25th, 2023, and it was deemed complete on February 24th, 2023. Under the Planning Act, the city must accept and process planning applications that have been deemed complete. An application has been deemed complete when all necessary plans, studies, and reports have been provided. As part of this process, the OPA application is circulated to various city staff and external agencies for their review. The Planning Act also requires that for official plan amendment applications, one open house and one public meeting are held, tonight being the first of those. This open house meeting is to present the proposal and collect feedback. During the second public meeting, which will likely be held later this spring, City Council will consider the application and vote on a decision. It should be noted that the official plan amendment being discussed this evening only pertains to designation, which governs the use, density, and general height of the proposal. Aspects of the proposal, such as building placement, parking, and landscaping, are discussed and finalized during the site plan approval process. However, at this time, all comments are welcome and feedback is appreciated. At the time of submission for the official plan amendment, the applicant made 2 additional submissions for a Niagara Escarpment development permit and site plan approval. The Niagara Escarpment development permit is assessed by staff at the Niagara Escarpment Commission, who assesses a proposal based on potential visual and ecological impacts of the Niagara Escarpment. The Niagara Escarpment development permit is being assessed concurrently with the official plan amendment. However, one cannot be approved without the other. The site plan approval application will focus on the finer details of the development. However, this application will only be processed should the official plan amendment receive approval by council. To provide a bit more context on the subject lands, here is an aerial image of 226 Lockhart Drive, which is a corner property with a total area of approximately 0.67 hectares with about 0.37 0.34 hectares being developable. It has frontage along Lockhart Drive, which is a local road, and Glenridge Avenue, which is a regional arterial road. The lands were previously used as a place of worship with a two-story church structure. The property is located at the foot of the escarpment and is bordered by this natural feature to the south. The property is in proximity to Brock University, Hotel de Shaver, and a number of other commercial and employment uses along Glenridge Avenue to the south. The rest of the surrounding neighborhood to the north, east, and west is primarily made up of detached, semi-detached, and apartment dwellings. The applicant is proposing to redevelop the subject lands for a 5-story residential building containing 22 dwelling units to be serviced by 26 parking spaces, including 3 accessible parking spaces. The proposal has a residential density of approximately 65.19 units per hectare and a proposed height of 19.1 meters. To facilitate this proposal, the official plan amendment application proposes to redesignate the subject lands from low-density residential to medium-density residential in the official plan. As can be seen in the conceptual site plan shown here, the applicant is proposing to only redevelop on a portion of the subject lands as the rear portion of the property is within and makes up part of the Niagara Escarpment. The rear portion will not be developed and will remain as is. The division between the naturalized and developable portion of the lands is important for understanding how policies apply. The rear portion of the lands will have a specific type of designation that protects these lands from being developed. So when we are discussing permitted uses in the next few slides, they will only be referring to the front half of the property. The site plan will also be discussed a little bit later in the presentation. First policy designation we will touch on is the Niagara Escarpment Plan. The subject lands are within the Niagara Escarpment Plan area and are designated urban area and escarpment natural area and are within the plan's area of development control. Subject to a development permit granted through the NEC, the urban area permits development and uses subject to conforming to the development criteria set out within the Niagara Escarpment Plan, which includes ensuring that the natural areas of the escarpment are protected and shall not be designed to be prone to natural hazards. Because the subject lands are within the development control area, the city's zoning bylaw is not applicable to the proposed development. The subject lands are currently designated low-density residential and natural areas on Schedule E8 of the Garden City Plan. The low-density designation permits a range of residential uses, including detached, semi-detached, townhouse, duplex, triplex, and fourplex dwellings with a general density of 25 to 32 units per hectare. Buildings will generally not exceed a maximum height. To facilitate the proposed development, as was stated previously, the applicant is proposing to redesignate the lands from low-density residential to medium-density residential. Permitted uses in the medium-density residential designation include detached, semi-detached, duplex, triplex, fourplex, townhouse, and apartment dwellings at a density range generally between 25 and 99 units per hectare. Buildings will generally not exceed a maximum height of 20 meters. As previously mentioned, as the subject lands are within the Niagara Escarpment Plan area, and as such, the city's zoning bylaw is not applicable. Had the lands not been located within the escarpment area, a zoning bylaw amendment application would have also been required in conjunction with the OPA application in order to facilitate the proposed development. This would have likely requested to rezone the lands from the I1 zone, which is local neighborhood institutional, to the R3 zone, medium density residential, to conform with the proposed OP designation. While the zoning bylaw does not apply, staff will use the provisions of the R3 zone to guide recommendations on the proposed development. So here is a more scoped view of the proposed site plan for the development, which shows the building footprint, driveways, and pedestrian pathways. I've highlighted in orange 4 outdoor parking spaces that have been provided, including 1 accessible space. The subject lands are proposed to have 2 vehicular access points via Lockhart Drive. Surrounding the building will be a variety of landscaping. A wood board fence is also proposed along the westerly property line, shared with a detached dwelling. So the majority of parking spaces are located within a ground floor ground level parking garage, so there will be no residential units on the main floor. There are a total of 22 indoor parking spaces proposed, including 2 accessible spaces. In addition to the 4 spaces outside, there are a total of 26 parking spaces provided. If zoning applied, the minimum parking requirements for an apartment dwelling are 1.25 parking spaces per dwelling unit, which would equate to a total of 28 parking spaces required for this development. I'll briefly just show some elevations of the proposed development. The highest point of this building is proposed to be at approximately 19.1 meters. So shown here are the east elevations or east facing building face along Glenridge Avenue. This slide shows the opposite side of the building facing west. And then lastly is the north or front facing elevation, which is along Lockhart Drive. So to date, staff have received a number of written comments prior to today. I've included some of the more common questions or comments that I've received so far on the slide here. I would say overall that there has been a general opposition to the proposal, mostly citing that the proposed development is incompatible with the surrounding neighborhood. We've received questions regarding the type of tenure that this building is proposed to be. The applicant informed staff that no tenure has been decided at this time, which is sometimes the case for proposed multiple dwelling units. Should the amendment be approved and it be decided that development will be for a condominium, there will be additional planning applications required to register the building as a condo. Further to this, we've received several comments expressing concern that due to proximity of the property to Brock University, this development may be intended for students. I would just like to point out that who may ultimately live within a building is not a planning matter and cannot be used to dissuade a proposed development. There were also significant concerns regarding the amount of parking provided, and that 26 spaces is insufficient for 22 dwelling units. Further, there are concerns about where visitors will park and what the impact will be on the surrounding streetscape and street parking. There were also several comments made that it is difficult to turn onto Glenridge during peak times, and there are worries that additional traffic from the property will further exacerbate this. Staff are still waiting for comment from traffic and the region to make comment on this. There were also concerns about the impact it will have on views on the escarpment. A visual impact assessment report was submitted as part of this application. However, this aspect will be evaluated by the Niagara Escarpment Commission as part of their approval process. And lastly, there were comments or questions about environmental impact, given that the subject lands are along the Niagara Escarpment, which is a natural heritage feature as well. An environmental impact assessment has been completed. The study concluded that while no negative impacts are expected as a result of development, the report does make several recommendations to further mitigate any impact to the natural area, including establishing tree protection areas during construction and mitigating light exposure so as not to disturb nesting birds or other wildlife. Again, just a reminder that following tonight's meeting, if you'd like to review the materials submitted with this application, you can do so by visiting stcatharines.ca/development and finding the folder labeled 226 Lockhart Drive. So at this time, staff are looking for comments from the public regarding this proposal. All feedback collected is being compiled and will be shared with the applicant and City Council. Staff will be preparing a recommendation report for this application, which will be made public prior to being considered by Council. As mentioned, this will be considered by Council and voted upon during a second public meeting, which will be held later this spring. Notice will be mailed out to the surrounding properties and signs will be posted on site. Yep, so thank you to anyone who's tuned in. I will now open the floor to the applicants if they'd have any comments or would like to share anything. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Madeline. That's an excellent and comprehensive presentation. We appreciate it very much. This evening, we're here really to listen. You've outlined the issues quite well that you've heard from the neighbors, and we would like to understand more fully what those issues might be. We have, in our evaluation, tried to respond, at least in our initial proposal, to some of the points that have been made. The building is set back from Lockhart, so that the frontage of Lockhart is open and spacious. We set back the building from the property to the west as far as we could. And in terms of overlook, the fifth floor, which is really amenity space only, the ability to overlook is really to the east and not to the west. So we have made every effort we could to have this particular development fit with the neighborhood, notwithstanding that it is in an excellent location for it. So we're looking forward to hearing comments from the public, and if there are any detailed design questions, we can respond to those as well.
Okay, great, thank you. With that, we will move on to registered participants. Again, I will just call out people that have signed up, and you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself once I call upon you. So we will start with Kieran.
Hi there.
Hi, Kieran.
So I can comment now just on whatever it is I want to comment about the proposal.
Absolutely.
Right. So I know that there were concerns shared about how much parking would be available. I'm kind of in the opposite direction here. I would think that it would make sense to reduce the amount of parking. I know there is a parking minimum here, but also the proposal is quite near 2 bus stops. And so I think it would be appropriate to reduce the amount of parking, especially since less parking in this case means more space for housing, and in other areas where an increase in driving would result in more space being put for parking, as well as potentially more lanes on roads, would then reduce the amount of space that would be used for employment and for housing and for parks and natural areas. I noticed that on the garden plan, the Garden City plan, it says that this plan recognizes that in order to achieve a healthy and livable community, the transportation system now and in the future will need to reduce reliance on the automobile in favor of more sustainable forms of connective transportation, such as walking, cycling, and transit. And I think that in terms of having 26 parking spaces for a development like this, it would be encouraging the use of cars over all other forms of transportation. The only other thing I have to comment on this proposal is in terms of the impact on the natural environment. It seems that there isn't really any part of this proposal that is directly encroaching on the Niagara Escarpment. However, the potential for the introduction of invasive species and non-native species that can be harmful to natural areas in the environment in the Niagara Escarpment, there is a potential for that. And so I would hope that any of the landscaping that is being done is using hopefully mostly native species, and any non-native species that are used will be ones that have a low potential to escape and invade into the natural areas of the escarpment. And that's all I have to say for today.
Thank you very much, Kieran. And tonight, for everybody, I am just making notes. So we are taking your comments, and we will be using those and sending those to council as well. So thank you. All right. Next, we have Jeffrey.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
My name is Jeffrey Atkinson. I'm a resident on Lockhart Drive, 211. In fact, I'm looking out my window right now, almost at the corner of the lot where the proposed building will be. I've lived here for 25 years. And in fact, I knew people who used to attend the church on that corner. And so there's a lot of community history in the evolution of our neighborhood. And there are other properties in the neighborhood that have undergone similar evolutions. And I have to say that they have done so with what appear to be incredibly more graceful change than what is proposed in this project. When you step out on South Glenridge and Lockhart Drive, in almost any weather, in any season, you get this splendorous vision of the ridge of the escarpment as it slopes down towards Niagara Falls. It changes day to day, it changes season to season. Only a few days ago, there was a beautiful vision of mist and low-lying clouds as it came creeping across the tops of the trees. And I noticed that the height of the proposed building at 19 meters is almost equivalent to the new Cairns Science Building, Health and Science Complex at Brock University, which is truly a monster and happens to be a building that I work in. A building of that size on this lot, and where it's put on this lot, so close to the road on Lockhart and backed right up against Glenridge, is essentially a vision barrier to anything and to anyone wishing to see and experience the glory of the escarpment in weather of all seasons. I was struck by the somewhat humorous tone of the sightline report provided by the developers, which included sightlines from so far away that it was comical. Looking from St. David's Road, 2 kilometers up Glenridge, where you could see a tiny corner of the building. But for the people who live on this corner, including Lockhart and surrounding streets, this is going to be essentially a road sign on our front lawn, blocking everything that is appropriate for living in Niagara, this beautiful Niagara escarpment. The condition of the sightline report also states that, well, it's only a seasonal thing, that if the trees are in foliage, you couldn't see it anyways. And that really concerns me because there's only 3 trees on the north side of the lot. And in no part of the reports do I see any compensation for those trees should the developers get an easement to move closer to Lockhart Drive. The idea that in somehow the seasonal change of foliage coverage and vision lines is going to amount to anything is moot. The building structure at 19 meters, if I do my algebra correctly, completely obscures the escarpment ridge line from standing on the north side of Lockhart Drive outside my house. Yes, I'm speaking for myself and my close by neighbors, but I would try to underscore that by saying that the development is out of touch with the smallness of the lot, out of touch with the density of the already existing structures in this neighborhood, and that it's going to destroy an appreciable portion of the visual appreciation of the escarpment, a place that I walk through every day, sometimes twice a day. I can't comment too much on the more technical aspects of the application for drainage and soil and whatnot. Traffic, I understand now, is almost unarguable because, as you pointed out, Madeline, in your introduction, we can't make any arguments based on who's going to be in the building. But we already know we have a history of parking issues in this neighborhood because we've had to have strictures on parking overnight because certain people would park here and then walk up to the university, I assume mostly. And so we've had to have parking restrictions to try and limit that. I suspect that this is only going to add to that and that people are going to start parking further and further into the neighborhood, my neighborhood, and we will pay the price for that. If you've ever traveled this will be my last comment, I won't take up much more of your time. If you've ever traveled up Glenridge Avenue in the wintertime or in bad weather, you may know how hard the hill is to guess. How is it going to be today if it's snow or sleet or rain? It's somewhat like going up Burley Hill or going down Burley Hill. I've been here for a long time. I've seen a number of weather scenarios where people get trapped halfway up the hill, or the traffic backs up because they don't have the courage to attempt that. And it's going to be made even worse when you can't make the visual acuity and decision-making when you're coming from Glenridge or Lockhart or Woodside Drive to say, I can't go up the hill. There's a monster apartment block that's blocking my view of what's ahead. I hope the planners are starting their discussions with a big ask in their hopes that they can get something much smaller. And I hope that everyone uses their wisdom to achieve that goal. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. Next we have Nancy.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Caleb, is Caleb here? Nope. Okay. Mary. No, I don't see Mary. Warren.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Excellent. Jeffrey, I just want to comment, what an excellent presentation. And you're on the same track as I am in regards to this development. This development does not fit the natural beauty of this area in the very least. And I'm personally, as well as I know many of my neighbors, are strongly opposed to it. However, I'm the only one here from my neighbors. I live on Woodington, which is halfway down Lockhart to the end of Hydro Hill and Glenridge. And I can tell you that just by the proposal made, this will be a complete building that's out of place for this area. This has large lots, single housing, single residential dwellings, and it just doesn't fit the neighborhood. And I think by the height of this building, it will take away the natural beauty of the escarpment. And I find it curious that it said they have no environmental impact. Well, I walk almost every day with my dogs in the escarpment, which I have a great fortune to. I find it very relaxing, and I call it a forest bath because it's very therapeutic. And to have a 5-story glass tower in this neighborhood, in a world, biosphere reserve, right in the core of that reserve, it will have an environmental impact. I live in a bungalow with a walkout in the backyard, and I have birds, even in my small home, hitting the windows. With this 5-story monster at the corner of Glenridge and Lockhart, with glass everywhere, I can just about guarantee you there will be hundreds of birds killed every year flying into those windows. And I can tell you that I know there's nesting owls just at Lockhart and Woodington. If you walk into the forest, it's just, for me, it just is astounding that no one looks at this, that the birds will fly into those buildings. This building does not belong in this area. The glass will not, they'll fly right into it. So it will have an environmental impact. That's, to me, it's nonsensical. It doesn't make sense. You have a 5-story, 60, I think I made the transition from 19.1 meters is 62 feet. And you're having this 5-story glass tower in the middle, in the core of a world biosphere zone, where there's over 300 bird species along the Niagara Escarpment. And you're going to tell me that that's not going to be a hazard for those birds flying? I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. In 1990, it was designated as a World Biosphere Reserve. And to have that designation is a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I think by putting this development in this area will destroy the natural beauty and will endanger birds because birds fly into windows. So you have a 60-foot plus structure with windows all around, birds will be flying into it, guaranteed. And it'll be hundreds of birds. And that may not be a big thing to a lot of people, but if we talk about environmental, sustainability and, worried about our environment, it's more than just talk. It's not just throwing a couple cans in a recycling box. We have to think of these things because they're important to the beauty of the environment we live in. And, that's one of the points I have. And I'm strongly opposed to it on that environmental, fact that this will have a major impact on the over 300 bird species. And you can look it up if you don't believe me, because that's how many there are. And you see them. And we've even seen bald eagles starting to come into the area. And it will have an impact. It will have an environmental impact. I don't believe it. Sorry. Secondly, as I said a bit earlier, it's designed as a single residential area. If you look at the lots, if you look how the layout of this neighborhood is, it sort of flows into the escarpment. It flows into the natural beauty of the escarpment with all the trees and all the wildlife and everything else. And then you have this monstrosity of a 5-story glass apartment building stuck right in the middle. It's going to be an eyesore. It's not going to be conducive to the fabric of the neighborhood. And it just doesn't work. It's not like putting townhomes where you won't have that huge 60-foot plus tower of glass. It doesn't fit the fabric. It will impact. There's no sidewalks on Lockhart. So if you want to go for a walk, you're going to put more people in here. You can't even go for a walk on Lockhart. You got to dodge the traffic. So there's another thing. The infrastructure doesn't permit this type of building here. It's just going to add more people into a neighborhood that wasn't designed for that many people stuck in the neighborhood. That doesn't even have a sidewalk on Lockhart. The traffic, you can't put a traffic sign, you can't put a traffic signal or intersection at the bottom of the Glenridge at Lockhart there because of what Jeffrey said. You have bad weather. The sight lines they're horrendous already, and you're only going to make them worse with this apartment building. So that's not practical. You're going to add more cars, more people into an area that does not have the infrastructure to support that type of building. So that's my second point. I'm not anti-development. I understand there needs to be housing, but this structure does not fit the fabric of this neighborhood, not even close. It's going to have a major environmental impact on nesting birds in this area. And, for someone to come from the outside thinking, well, it's not going to have an impact, believe me, having lived here for 15 years and walking in the neighborhood, and walking in the escarpment almost on a daily basis and seeing the wonderful beauty of the escarpment, is going to be destroyed by that. This is not Toronto. It's not some downtown core. It's a wonderful, vibrant neighborhood that was designed in a way that it is single dwelling, spacious, being able to enjoy the beauty of a fabulous escarpment. And then we're going to have this tower come out of nowhere and just sit there. It to me, it's mind-boggling, and it just won't fit the fabric of the neighborhood. It will impact on traffic. It will impact on pedestrian traffic as well, not only vehicular. So I'm strongly opposed, and I'm looking forward to the in-person meeting where I could have much more I hope an impact to make sure that this type of building does not belong in this neighborhood, and I'm strongly opposed. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Warren. All right. Next, William.
Thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank the members of the Planning Committee for the opportunity to speak on this very important issue this evening. I take it from what you earlier said, Madeline, that you have a copy both of my memo of April the 19th and Mr. Jones's letter of April the 23rd.
Yes.
And I'm going to be referring to both of those documents. I'm simply going to refer to Mr. Jones's letter as the Jones critique. So I'm going to start by introducing myself. I'm William Neville. I'm Jeff's next door neighbor. I live at 209 Lockhart. My wife and I moved here approximately 19 months ago from Eastern Ontario, and we love the neighborhood. And I'm going to move from the general to the particular. So let me start with a pretty general point. Those of us who live on Lockhart Drive chose to live here for a reason. We could have purchased on Martindale Heights, in Merritton, on Western Hill, or on the North End. We did not. We chose to buy and live next to the Niagara Escarpment, which, as both Jeff and Warren have mentioned, was designated over 33 years ago by the United Nations, by UNESCO, as a World Biosphere Reserve, one of only 12 in Canada. Let's consider that for a moment. Lockhart Drive lies alongside one of the most unique geographical formations and biospheres in all of Canada. That's where Lockhart Drive owners chose to live, not next to an industrial site or moose pasture or vacant farmland, but in harmony with nature and all that the Niagara Escarpment has to offer. Now I want to turn to specifics. You've already heard Jeff's criticisms about the visual impact report. I share his concerns, and I adopt the critique in the Jones critique, where it is indicated that the visual impact report focuses too narrowly on the impact on the ridgeline. With respect, that's rather like looking at one piece of a jigsaw puzzle or one square on a checkerboard and then extrapolating as to what the impact would be on the overall puzzle. The visual impact report should have focused on the escarpment as a whole, as an ensemble, not as something one could examine piecemeal. In utilizing too narrow a focus, the visual impact report suffers, in my view, in its quality as a result, and I submit that it is a report that should not be accorded any weight by this committee or by City Council in its deliberations. Let me turn now to the considerations of density and height, both of which Mr. Jones highlighted in the Jones critique. When you distill the Landex planning justification report, and with great deference to the gentlemen that are the authors of that report that are with us tonight, one seems to get the conclusion from it that, if I can use the vernacular, 5 stories is really no big deal. You've already heard what Warren had to say about that. Let me add to that. There are no other 4 or 5 story buildings currently on Lockhart Drive, nor are there currently on Glenridge, south of Glendale, until one arrives at the top of the escarpment at the Bronx campus. As in none, 0. I do concede that north of Glendale, for example, there is the Homestead development near Dennis Morris High School, but that's a very different neighborhood where there's considerable commercial and retail space and strip malls. Our neighborhood is quite different. Jeff has said that, Warren has said that, I'm repeating that. And I think it bears repeating so that the developer understands this neighborhood stands shoulder to shoulder in opposition to this proposal. The homes that are being found on Sovereign, Lockhart Drive, Wooddale, and Marsdale all reflect an upscale, middle-class neighborhood with no commercial elements and no apartment buildings. Let me move from density to height. Warren touched on this. Let's consider the following for all those who are on this Zoom meeting tonight. If you drive east on Glendale from Glen Ridge, you can see a new development on the south side of Glendale where the Mountain View Church was once located. Madeline was good enough to provide me yesterday with the advice that the height of that project is 11.17 meters. Now that may not seem like very much, but when I drove by it again today, it seemed pretty high to me. But it's only 11.17 meters, and it appears to be a mixture of townhouses, duplexes, and triplexes. What the developer is proposing here on our street is an apartment building that would be 7.93 meters higher. To put it in other terms, almost 26 feet higher than what is currently being erected on Glendale, 70% higher than what is on Glendale. This is not a building that would fit within our neighborhood. It would define and dwarf the neighborhood. This cannot be permitted to happen. Consequently, from the perspective of both density and height, the proposed redevelopment would represent a significant, and I submit, an unwarranted intensification of the neighborhood. The developer's current submission is also deficient in other respects. In my memo, I outlined several problematic areas in the Colville report, and I'm not going to go through them again tonight except to highlight one, and that is when you read the GHD noise impact study, it references the fact, and I'm going to quote from point 9 of my memo, where at page 7 of the GHD noise impact study, it says, base building cooling and ventilation systems for the development have the potential to result in noise impacts on noise-sensitive areas within the development itself and the existing residential uses surrounding the site. Yet astoundingly, such a matter is not even addressed in the Colville report. Surely the increase of ambient noise caused by increased vehicular traffic and tons of operating HVAC systems for the building should be of concern of all residents of Lockhart Drive and this committee, and more specifically, what the impact of that noise is going to be on the World Biosphere Reserve, which is the Escarpment. I respectfully submit that the Colville report is woefully deficient, superficial, and inadequate for reasons expressed in my memo, reasons expressed by Mr. Jones, and echoed quite eloquently tonight by both Jeff and Warren, such that it cannot, indeed it must not, be relied on by this committee or by City Council. I will not go into the parking thing. I think that's been pounded to death, but I also have concerns that there is no traffic impact study, particularly when we just had the Canada Student Games or Canada Games facility erected up at Brock, and we already have difficulties getting out on Glenridge as it is. And I believe the committee and City Council and all of us deserve the benefit of a good traffic impact study in order to determine what the real and true impact would be of this building on that site in our neighborhood. In summary, the developer's submission, particularly the reports currently filed, do not make a compelling case for this development. What is in fact borne out is how completely disproportionate and unsuitable this proposed development would be in the face of the existing neighborhood and its seamless integration with the Niagara Escarpment. We, the homeowners, may be the David in this fight, but we don't need that Goliath of this apartment building on our street. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And lastly, we have Kevin.
Video there.
Hello, everyone. Here we are. Hi, everyone. My name's Kevin Kavanaugh. My wife Sarah and I have lived about a block or so from this site for 2 decades now, and we have a few thoughts on this that I try not to duplicate the good things that have been said so far, but I may reinforce a couple of them. I'll distill it as much as possible here. I'll just cut to the chase. This proposal strikes me as being, given the circumstances it would be going into, is a traffic nightmare. So for public safety alone, I can't believe this would get approval. There's a huge difference between the handful of people who have left that parking lot on Sunday morning from church over the last 20 odd years versus 22 residences with the Monday to Friday commuting patterns exiting onto Lockhart. Lockhart is an artery for a large residential neighborhood that helps people, vehicles from that neighborhood get onto the artery of Glen Ridge Avenue. Lockhart itself, it's high traffic. It's already typically with fast moving vehicles who roll through the stop signs on there. And school buses. It has narrow gravel shoulders and no sidewalks. I remember when our sons were teenagers and they delivered papers, including delivering papers to homes on Lockhart. That safety was just a concern. Them walking down there. Pedestrians navigate the roadside at their peril with little space for street parking. The parking volume that I hope Kieran's right. By the way, I welcome that. That really visionary thinking of the next generation, or I have to be honest, probably a couple of generations behind me. But I fear that at this point in time, the volume of vehicles that would come with this many residences would inevitably require parking that's not facilitated in the proposal, and it's more than these narrow streets can safely accommodate. It would be a public safety nightmare. The driveways coming out of this 5-story building onto Lockhart, I think they're all looking at I'm just seeing the pictures tonight. Look like they're about 50 feet max from a stop sign that's at the foot of a hill on a busy, fast thoroughfare. I just think if you set out to design, and as Jeffrey pointed out a few minutes ago, the physical obstruction of that building, if you're coming out of Lockhart to your right, blocking your view of what's coming flying down the hill. If you set out to design a more dangerous traffic situation, you'd have trouble topping, I think, this combination of circumstances. And this is not NIMBYism. We welcome development, and we know there has to be sensible residential infilling. There just has to be. There's no question about that. But it has to be sensible. The logistics of this, like shoehorning a 5-story tower into this lot, I think would just reflect terrible critical judgment. Besides being totally out of character with the whole area, approving a proposal like this and opening the gate would set a precedent. If other residences, private, single family, or other residences and buildings were to come up for sale in the future and developers acquire them and say, well, there's already a 5-story tower there. We'll just keep the precedent's already been set, so it was good for them. Let's keep going. St. Catharines, is one of a handful of communities in Ontario along this rare United Nations biosphere reserve. And once we ruin that, we're never getting that genie back in the bottle. And it would be a real disgrace for the city to compromise its values and its virtues and allow something of this density, which is obviously out of character, with all of the circumstances and the setting around it. It would be something that you would never reverse, and it would just make us, a real disgrace for allowing this vulgar blight on this, this natural habitat that we've got here. there's more I could say, but everyone else has covered the topics. I offer those observations to the developers in goodwill. It's not NIMBYism, but this is a this is a neighborhood that's important to the city, and it's got to be that those things have to be taken into consideration. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. I believe that is all we have for registered participants tonight. Thank you again for everybody for providing your comments, and to everybody who has been watching on YouTube. Again, if you have any additional comments or questions after this, please feel free to reach out. I will just quickly put up my contact info. And and my contact info is there, my email. I can be reached by phone. And we thank everybody again for coming out tonight.